On now on the Launchpad, presented by Deloitte, Rethinking Planters on the Prairies. Discover how the Fendt Momentum Planter is changing the game for prairie farmers. Please welcome Arthur Santos, Marketing Manager, Fendt Planters NA for AGCO. Jim Latrace, Owner, LL Seeds, Lumsden, Saskatchewan. Dave Fuller, Chief Operating Officer, Synergy Ag. And the panel moderator, Myles Fuchs, Sales, Product Marketing, Nick Service Limited.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a great presentation that we're going to be presenting for you today. My name is Myles Fuchs. I'm a product specialist at Nick Service at Emerald Park, and we've got the unique opportunity today to be joined by some very knowledgeable individuals to talk about planters in Western Canada and really rethink what a planter can do for your farm. We've got one at our booth in Hall 11. And we've had a great morning of talking to folks, talking to growers, and hearing some of their concerns or some of their questions about planters. And one of the things that we hear again and again is, oh, I tried this years ago, my neighbor tried this years ago, and it didn't work. Well, one of the things that we have to consider with agriculture is just how quickly technology develops. So when you look back at some of those experiences that you or your neighbor have had with a planter, you have to look at the fertility that went into it. You have to look at the components that went onto the planter and look at it through the lens of what's happening in agriculture in 2025 and look at it through the most common lens or current lens that we can. So I'm here joined by Christine Kay, Project Lead, Smart Ag, Applied Research from Olds College. We didn't get her on the screen, a late addition, but we're very fortunate to have her expertise and have her joining us here today. So thank you very much, Christina. Beside her, we are joined by Arthur Santos, the Marketing Manager for Fendt Planters for North America. Thanks for joining us, Arthur. Next to him, we've got Dave Fuller. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Synergy Ag. And next to him, we've got Jim Latrace from LL Seeds in Lumsden, Saskatchewan. So we've got a host of knowledge. We've got a lot to talk about, and I don't want to hold things up anymore because we've got a lot to get through and some great information. I think the best place to start might be with you, Arthur. Looking at Planter 101, how does a planter do a better job of putting canola in the ground? We talk about precise seeds placement, we talk about singulation. What else might you be able to tell us about that?
So thanks for being here. Thanks for inviting us. I'd say we need to start with the fundamental C's, and that's something that I hear a lot at precision planting training. You hear this a lot of planter training from Fendt. When we talk about the fundamental C's, we're talking about clean, create, and close, and we're talking about the furrow. We're talking about the process of cleaning the furrow right in front before your opener blades are coming. And then when you're talking about creating the furrow, you're talking about a dual blade precisely hitting the ground and creating a V-shaped trench. And that is creating that perfect environment so you can put the seed, and then you have the close as you are closing the trench. And you're guaranteeing that seed to soil contact, you're guaranteeing that moisture, and you're guaranteeing the warmth. That's what we need for the germination. So the first thing we talk when we are comparing, can we plant this particular crop instead of drilling, is this is the difference. And I was talking to a colleague from Precision Planting, and he made a comparison, an analogy to say, when you're drilling, you're using a 12-gauge shotgun, and when you're planting, you have a sniper rifle. So it's all about that accuracy and that precision. So this is the starting point, and as preparing to come here, and also preparing to give a speech on canola at Commodity Classic, I was doing my homework and talking to people and understanding a little bit more about the drills, right? So we can have that comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that analogy really hits the nail on the head of the differentiator between a planter and a conventional drill, the buckshot versus the sniper rifle. Christina, when the Fendt Momentum was on Olds College, we did a trial with Olds College earlier this year, and I think you worked pretty closely with Arthur there. Going into that trial, did you have any preconceived notions about planters, or have you been around planters a little bit more frequently?
Planters for us isn't something that we have at Olds College Smart Farm. There is some in the area, but they're just not as common. I kind of didn't really know a lot about them, to be honest. Like, it was really just went in a little bit blind, just a few articles I read before. So yeah, I didn't really know a lot.
But I'm going to tell something. You just told me we were just sitting there and just waiting for the moment. And she looked at me and said, Arthur, I didn't know much about planters, but now I'm a believer. So we're talking about this year's trial and next year's trial, and that caught my attention, right? That it's when she said, I'm a believer, we're changing the way farmers look at this, right? We're not just changing a product, we're not just changing a brand. We are asking people to rethink a little bit the way that they are doing, right? And we're talking about people that farmers have been drilling for years and years. And it's not a simple thing to challenge that and to question. And I remember when I was paying a visit to you, Jim, sort of trying to pick a little bit your brain and how open you were to that conversation of doing things different, using a different equipment. And it's not that common for people to be that willing. So let me ask you this. How open are you to this kind of, let's experiment, let's try something new, let's change that? Have you thought about the planter before, or is this kind of something very, very new to you?
We are always trying to try new things. I think of my job as a kid in a sandbox, and I like new toys, and how can I do better at what we're doing? So we've examined the options before, and we've demoed and trialed them, but we've never committed to doing it full time.
And when we started thinking about this trial at Oates College, everything starts with how are we going to position this idea? If you're talking with the farmer and you are presenting a promise or a concept or idea, it's very hard to get the grasp of it and have the notion that can succeed. So something we've been doing for the last actually 5 years is if we're bringing some technology, a new process to the field, to the farmer, we gotta have the data, we gotta have the evidence, we gotta do the trial. So the concept of taking a renowned, a credible entity and partnering with them, right? Talking with experts in the industry as we're talking, and we'll talk soon about the fertility strategy. You gotta surround yourself with people that are credible, right? And you do that trial, you collect the data, and you provide the data. So this is something that we've been doing for the last 5 years in corn, and we're just did the first year with the Oates College of Agriculture and Technology last year.
Right. So now that we've talked a little bit about Planter 101 and some of the larger concept ideas of it, just before we get into that Oates trial, because I think that's really the meat and potatoes of what we want to talk about, right? What did this planter do in Western Canada? Arthur, you've been with Momentum since the beginning. We've talked about what a planter does better, right? Precise seed placement, singulation, reduced seed costs, better compaction. How does Momentum do those things better than other planters? What's kind of the history of the Momentum? How did it come to be? And we've got to talk about the precision planting components, right, that come directly on that planter. That's a huge differentiator for our planter versus what else is on the market.
If you go back 5 years ago, our number of customers was 0, market share was 0. We didn't have a planter. So as we come into this market with many, many, many options for farmers in 2019, we actually, even before that, when we were designing the planter, we had this crossroad. Do we build a planter that it's just like every other planter, just has a different color? Or do we build something that is different? It's gonna be a challenge to show that concept, right, to prove that concept. So you go back more than a decade ago, the path was chosen to do something different, right? When we talk about corn, we talk with corn farmers, the main pitch will not be on seed saving. The main pitch is not gonna be in that unique way of saving the seed cost and the singulation and the spacing. that is our main pitch on canola. Our conversation revolved around compaction, soil compaction. And you talk with some farmers and you say pinch row, and the farmers will look at you and say, and they, I know what you're talking about. Sometimes you talk with the farmer and you say pinch row, and they won't know. So the birth of Momentum's identity was trials, agronomy trials, partnering with Ohio State University, Ag PhD, Hefty Seeds, because they are a group together, Extreme Ag with farmers that are creating this educational content, and then farmers relate to listening to the farmers, right? And universities, colleges, that was the heart of it. So we've been doing trials on Momentum with these independent entities to bring the evidence. So everybody here probably heard about weight management, weight transfer. This big cylinder that's going to push the weight from the planter, from the center to the wings, right? So Momentum has some scales in the rims. We're measuring the weight of the planter. So it's not a manual weight transfer, we are transferring, right? We have the floating toolbar. I'm not going to go into the features that say these differences. You show up at a farmer and you bring all these differences with a brochure, it just, you don't connect. You got to bring the trial. Right? The University of Illinois trial, we took soil cores from the ground, put it in a CT scan machine, the same machine that's scanning our brain when we have an accident. We did CT scans of the soil cores. Then the university calculated the pore space and then plotted the cumulative pore space, which would relate with compaction, and bringing all that education into trainings and trials. So the history of Momentum, that also was the cue to start the conversation with the Oats College, was based upon trials. You get the evidence, you get a fertility strategy, treatment, a protocol, and once you build that, you get the data, and then in the end, it's all about bringing that profitability to the farmer. So this is a little bit of the history of Momentum and how we build a disruptive design that means nothing unless you can bring the evidence to the farmer that you're helping with profitability or with yield.
Perfect. So, Christina, just before we get into the Olds College results, I believe there was 19 measurables in the trial. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, we looked at pretty much everything I could possibly think of: soil, temperature, moisture, electrical conductivity, flea beetle pressure, plant stand, distance between plants. We looked at disease. List is long. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about the field, 60-some acre field?
So the field we did this on was a partner producer field. Historically, he does barley, canola rotation. It was about 69 acres, I believe. And we just did one strip from the precision planter and then one strip from the air seeder, kind of continuously across the field.
Perfect. And what was the fertility practices going into that?
So for this specific producer, they do broadcast all their granular fertilizer. So we just went with that.
Right. Right. And Dave, off of that kind of concept of fertility, obviously a lot different than what we're doing here. What are you kind of seeing from big growers and some of their concerns when they're getting into this topic of planting canola and some of the limitations that might come with the ability to get nutrients into the ground, fertility into the ground?
Yeah, good question. I think if we were to look back 10 years from today, a big change is a lot of you guys out there probably do have floaters. Managing a farm, it's managing ROI and efficiencies. And so there's lots of different ways, and agronomy. So you've got lots of hats you're wearing. So how do we manage our efficiency on the farm? How do we do the right agronomic decision? But we also got to get an ROI for that. And so as farms have expanded, as we spoon feed the crop a little more, that floating aspect for a lot of you guys probably has changed, and you probably either have a floater on your farm or you have a neighbor that does some floating for you. And so what I like about the Momentum is there's different ways to get fertility. And so, a full float, I might argue maybe agronomically isn't the best bet, in a lot of our areas in Saskatchewan. But can we, do an initial liquid phos starter with some nitrogen and then come out with a float after that? And there's lots of different ways that we could position that planter to do the right thing for the farm. And the way we set the drill up for my farm versus Jim's, I think they should be different because we're running different farms. We're in different soil zones, different areas. We're a valley between us, but it's a big valley. And so we manage different soil types. And so the way I would maybe set my momentum up would be different than Jim's, agronomically and also for his logistics. Is he running liquid? Is he all dry? All those sorts of things play a big piece in it. The other thing to back up a little bit, in terms of, again, on your farms, it's not all about the seeding rate. It's not all about your fertility. It's all these little pieces together that's going to make a difference on your farm, logistics and ROI. And so when we look at the abilities of the planter, you can singulate the prescriptions on your farm. So if some of you guys may be doing prescription management on your farm, you got 5 zones in the field, you pull your 84-foot drill across that field. And again, Jim's farm is different than my farm. I'm a little more hilly and rolly. My drill could be going through 3 different soil zones essentially at the same time. But I have to average that with my prescriptions to do the best average I can till we get to where it's all one zone. And so we do that, and I think it's effective, and we're doing some good things there. But with this planter, from my understanding is, Arthur, we could then, on this 40-foot drill, I could have 4 different prescriptions running down as I pull that planter across my different soil zones as I come up and down over a hill. And so again, all those little things are going to help you at the end of the day with an ROI. Is that fair, Arthur?
Yeah, one of the things the first thing that I realized as we are making this move into Western Canada is I look at these air drills and they are massive, right? We're talking about these massive tanks to try to put all that fertility in one pass. And one of the first things I need to understand farmers' fertility strategy. What is most common here? What's most common there? Are we using starter? And that's when we started talking, and I was just picking your brain. So the planter has this 1,000-gallon tank, which could very much apply your FOS, right? Your starter, right? But we still need to figure out, and this will be in a case by case, how are we going to put all that massive amount of nitrogen that we put. And every farmer has it different, right? Are we going to float? Is it going to be a pull between carts? Is it going to be something that you pull behind? But if you're making a tow hitch, and that's something that I have to worry about, can we make a tow hitch to pull this massive tank? So this is definitely the next step as we are building these customized solutions for each farmer. If I remember, you have a float solution, don't you, Jim? So can you tell us just a little bit about your fertility strategy?
Well, in our fertility, we try to replace what we remove. And so sometimes we have a multi-year strategy where we're putting down more fertilizer in our pulse year than we do in our canola year because we put it down for both years at the same time. We're doing that now. That's kind of what we're doing now. But your conversation twigged a couple of questions for me. Dave said our farms aren't the same, and so you can't set up your planter the same. But what twigged my mind was, what kind of maintenance do we have to do on a planter? Lots of farmers like me don't want to spend my whole summer or my whole winter rebuilding my machine in the shed. So what kind of expectation do you have for maintenance?
This I think it's the 5th time, right, that someone brought this up, because when you look at the amount of acres on average that a planter will cover in the States versus what I am envisioning that these planters will cover here, it's definitely more, right? So in the States, a 60-foot planter could very much be in an average of 5,000 acres in one season, right? And that is totally in line with the 3-year warranty, right? You have 12,000 acres or 3 years warranty. So from the majority of the U.S. farming with a planter, 4,000 acres in a season, that's a good average. I know there's people that will do more there and people that will do more here, but that's the average. What we've seen, and we have about 5 years of Momentum Planters in the field, right? We have seen that between the 2nd and that 3rd year is when the planter rebuild would happen. When I say a planter rebuild, I'm talking about the bushings in those parallel arms. I'm talking about the discs, the opener blades, and the guard, right? So we sometimes joke with farmers, say, hey, if you find a grease zerk in that planter, you can take it home. And of course, I'm not going to give a planter for free, and that's because I know that there's no grease zerk. So these bushings are self-lubricating bushings. They have like this graphite insert. So to get your question, between 8,000, and it will depend if the soil is more like sandy or clay-based, but on average, with about 500 planters that we have running in North America and about 2,000 that we have running in Brazil, it would be between 8,000 acres, so the second year of a U.S. farmer, and the third year that farmers would rebuild, right? They measure the diameter of the opener blades, right? They check the width of the seed guard, the seed tube guards, and the play that you would have in the parallel arm. So this would be bushings, blades, and guards. So it's nothing much different. So let me now ask the question about the drill. What are the common maintenance parts that you would replace on a drill after 2, 3, 4 seasons?
Well, on a tine drill, I think normally in Canada, what we do is trade it.
I like that idea too. Nothing against that.
So that begs the next question, though. Like, if those are the parts that you have to replace, you know what that costs. So then you divide it by the acres. What does it cost you for maintenance per acre would be my question.
So if we're talking about, I'm doing this math right now. So if we're talking about $8,000 for a complete rebuild, and we're talking 8,000 acres, they gave us a very simple calculation there. I was lucky enough that I didn't have to work hard on that, but that is the ballpark.
Is that U.S. before tariffs?
US.
Or? Okay.
Let's not talk tariffs. But that's U.S. dollars, yes.
The second question that I had along those lines, we're used to a big four-wheel drive tractor. What kind of horsepower do you need to pull this planter, based on rows, I suppose?
And this leads to a conversation about the investment, right? It's good that the conversation is flowing in multiple directions, but this just gave me the cue. So when you're buying a 60-foot planter, right, the tractor that will pull it, it will be lower than the same tractor that will have to pull this big air drill. So there's a rule of thumb when you're doing low-speed planting, about 5 miles an hour, you can multiply 10 miles an hour by the number of rows. Rule of thumb, if you have hilly terrain, it will suck that horsepower, right? But if you have that kind of relatively flat rolling terrain, 10 horsepower per row. This one here in the show has 48 rows, so you have a 500 horsepower, you'll be more than enough. If you're planting with this planter, a 60-foot planter, planting at 6 miles an hour, you could very much compare that efficiency with an 80-foot drill. So now let me ask the question, so what kind of horsepower do you need when you're pulling an 80-foot drill in the field? Above 600 horse.
All of them.
So that's also something that we've seen in the trial, right? So tell us about the speed, the target speed, and what was the speed that we saw when we kind of let the leash go of the planter operator and we let him go faster?
So basically the day of seeding, it had been raining for like a week before, so we were kind of standing in the field waiting for the field to dry up before we could seed it. I was pretty adamant, like we're gonna go 4.5 miles per hour, like let's be consistent. I mean, as the day got longer, operators got hungrier, I didn't have lunch, that was a big mistake. So basically, I did see that the singulation did improve with the planter as the faster they went, kind of near the end of the day. That was just a couple passes, but it's still kind of something that I noted in the as-applied data.
So the target was 4.5 miles an hour, and we had to kind of slow the planter down by the last few passes. I don't know if they wanted to go home or if we let them go, but the operators they were able to speed up to above 6 miles an hour, and we were still doing the job that we needed to do on singulation and the spacing. And this kind of jumps back to the beginning, the first. So why are we saying that we should consider planting canola instead of drilling canola, right? And it's not about the planter versus the drill. It's just about what can we do. When we can do that precise plant spacing between the seeds, when we can singulate that a tiny seed of canola, instead of controlling the spill, we are putting one after one. It really allows the germination rate, the seeds to thrive, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but 95% of the plant seed survived and thrived all the way to harvest, where on the air seeder was 75%. Around 75% was the survivability. So this plays a big part in the seeding rate, right? If I was saying that in canola, our pitch is not about saving seed costs, it's about compaction and yield. That's one thing. When we're talking about canola, the change, the rethinking planters in the prairies, as the name of the session is, we can really lower that seeding rate, knowing that we are still getting the plants per square feet that we need, right? Knowing that we don't need to put all that cushion, right? Because a lot of them will never survive, and still get to the final results. So I don't want to throw you under the bus, making you remember all the numbers, but remind us seeding rate of the planter, seeder, and some of the numbers, please.
Yeah, so we targeted 5 to 7 plants per square foot. So Precision Planter, they advised us to go 2.2 pounds per acre, and our actual as applied rate was about 2.1 pounds per acre. And then our agronomist for the Old College Smart Farm had us lower our actual rate from the label rate for the whole farm. So we were targeting 3.8, but there was an error in calibration, so we ended up around 3.2 pounds per acre. So about a pound per acre difference.
Can I jump in there real quick? One thing, couple things, I guess. In terms of fertility, to come back just quickly, my guess would be if we were doing the same trial, only having all of the fertility in the drill, in our typical drill we're running, versus some with the planter and some floated, we're pushing a lot of fertility down a narrow 3/4 inch band, and we are having some seed safety issues with that. Everybody's soil is different. My farm has come over the hill. It's going to be different than in my low spots. And so the split application does help with that as well. And our agronomy hat would say, if it's buried in the soil, it's safe. We're not going to have any volatilization. Les Henry, rest his soul, I believe his data, I think it was from 1972, but unless it's 4 inches deep, it doesn't really matter in terms of volatilization. So we can be sinking, our 120 pounds, 140 pounds nitrogen, inch to the side, inch below. Depending on conditions in our soil type, we can still have volatilization. And so a broadcast application split can help with our seed safety, our salt in our band. And so there's benefits, and probably would see increased seed survivability versus all at one time. And in terms of seeding rate too, I just want to comment, as you guys are buying bags of seed, majority of the seed, most companies have gone to A, B, C, D, and so they've gone to seed sizes in the bag. Just going to be cautious, as we talk seeds per acre, and that, we got to do that for examples. But 3 pounds of a 7.5 TKW versus 3 pounds of a 3.2 TKW is a lot different, and so we've got to be aware. I like talking of percentage. They're saying 10 acres a bag. Can we go 13 acres or is it 15 acres? And it would depend on those seed sizes. Just got to be careful of that as we look at seeding rates. We're looking at that TKW, and then what percent off of that are we willing to go?
What's the size of the seed, the canola seed, on average that you have in your farm, Jim? In that 1,000 kernels, how many grams is that? Do you have this? I don't want to throw you under the bus with the number, but it will kind of spark the next conversation.
It depends on the year. I suspect this year it'll be quite small because we had a dry July, but we've had it range from as low as 3.8 to as high as 7.6. and it changes your seeding rate. It's like crazy.
It depends on genetics. It depends on where that said company had their seed grown, and then depends on conditions, as Jim said. And so we in our sheds, we've got basically 3.0 to 7.5, and so that is a percentage-wise, that's a pretty big swing. So
This trial we had in 1,000 kernel, it was 5.70 grams. And talking with farmers all day, and you just confirmed this, it's right in the middle of that scale, right? It goes from 3 all the way to 7. So in this particular trial, with the 5.7 grams, we had 2.1 on the planter versus 3.2 on the seeder, which is a low, right? It's a lower than the normal rate, right? And on the label, it's as high as 5. And as we got to, before we got to yield, and you said there was 19 protocols, planting depth, NDVI, NDYI, so how green the vegetation is, how yellow it is, crop height. A couple things caught my attention from the agronomy side. Can you tell us a little bit about stem diameter, leaf area, and branches, pods?
Yeah, so I do want to say that, like, for all of our calculations that we did for germination percentage and stuff, we did base that off of the number of seeds based on the 1,000 kernel weight. So yeah, just in case there's any questions about that. Just due to the better plant distribution and I think wider row spacing, so the precision planter had 15-inch and the air seeder had 13-inch. We did end up with seeing bigger leaves, bigger stems, similar plant height with the precision planter. So, I mean, and more pods per plant, which is also pretty important.
did you see any difference in disease pressure? Wider row, more air, less sclerotial bodies? Did you guys monitor that at all?
So that was on my radar. Just with the newer variety we used, it was sclerotinia resistant. We had a drier year, so the pressure just wasn't there every time I went to look. But that was definitely why I was like, well, there's gonna be more spacing, so there should be less disease pressure.
I just was going to make another comment. It's like a public service announcement too. This exists in other crops. This year we're cleaning durum. It's 33 grams 1,000 kernel weight. Normally durum is like 49. So we can get the same plant population this year with 90 pounds of durum compared to normally we're seeding around 150 pounds. So check your seed, because in every crop it matters.
And not to talk only about the protocols that we had the advantage, the stem, leaf area, more branches, more pods, more flowers. Let's talk about something that would be on the other side. It would be a disadvantage. And someone, I can see them here, the lights are not helping much, but he asked me, Arthur, what about flea beetle pressure, right? So tell us a little bit about why we chose the flea beetle damage assessment. What's the logic behind? And then a little bit of what you saw, which would be against the planter.
Yeah, so flea beetles are, like, we're aware of them. We don't spray as often for them in our region. But I guess just with the idea that there's gonna be less plants, that's less food for flea beetles, meaning more flea beetle damage per plant, we might hit a threshold a lot sooner. So with the planter, we did see about 7% damage, which was a lower seeding rate. So our theory was kind of correct with the sense that the air seeder had 5% damage, which both are really low still. But we did see an increase in damage on the planter.
The whole concept of having a neutral trial is that you don't cherry pick the protocols that you win. You talk about everything, and this isn't a report, right? The Oates College, can you just share a little bit about the report and the sharing of the data?
Yeah, I did too want to bring up that, you would think that with a wider row space, soil moisture would be impacted. However, we did see a fairly consistent soil moisture between both treatments throughout the whole summer, actually.
And the report from the Oates College will be made available in the website as well?
Yeah, we'll have the fact sheet and everything up on the website. There is some information there now, but I have to do some work when I get back.
Sorry, Jim, your drill now, you seed canola at a 15-inch spacing with your drill, correct? A couple years now?
3 years.
And I think as we, that seems a little crazy to some of us. essentially, you know, went from a 9-inch and 12 is a big gap. Now we're going to 15. What have you seen the last couple of years with your 15 versus your 12 before? Is that correct?
There's so many changes that happened, though. We went to a 15-inch drill, but we went to a dual shank drill, and it's a single row drill. So there's so many changes from running with just an old 5710 hoe drill that I think we made so many changes you can't blame it all on the 15. But what we did is we're seeing a lot more survivability. Our mortality rate went way down. And so we lowered our seeding rate. Our target population is lower. We're aiming for 4.5 instead of 8. And our stalks got much bigger, which leads me to my next question. Has there been any plans in that? Well, there's two questions. The first one, we were talking about earlier about residue management, and how do you do that in your trials? Did you have residue managers on your planter? And how do you manage that so that we're not mixing whatever's sitting on the surface?
We did, so since he did broadcast fertilizer, we did harrow that. That's just general practice. The barley straws, we just kind of seed it as we normally would, that you would at home. We didn't change anything for trash management before the planting.
And again, talking with farmers, it's been a very educational day. I heard about the concerns with residue. I heard about hairpinning. So some terminology there that I was not that familiar. But one of the good things about that first C, or the clean, create, and close, is how effective these planters residue management solutions are, right? You have the 2 wheels. Most of them are floating, but you have the ability to put a cylinder, a pneumatic cylinder, in your residue management, in your trash sweeper. So if you are going in a more no-till, when you have a lot of stubble, a lot of residue there, you don't want to lose that residue. You want it. It's organic matter. It keeps the moisture. But at the same time, you can't have it in the furrow. So when you're cutting, you're not bringing all that residue in. So you can set the residue manager on a planter to float, or more aggressive, less aggressive from the cab, right? I'm not saying that the drills won't have a pneumatic control residue management. I know other planters have. It's not something groundbreaking, but when it comes to this particular utilization, you clean just enough for that furrow to be sliced, and you keep most of that residue still there.
Brings me to another question. Because I use a different single tine drill that's on a single rank, and we have these big trash wheels that pull the trash through, what do you do to manage that trash that could build up between your ranks?
So this is something I know here it's 15-inch spacing. That's the popular one, and people want to go narrow. But the Momentum Planter, you have 15, 20, 22, and 30-inch spacing. The 30, the 20, and the 22-inch spacing, the rows are totally in line. They are one next to the other. When we get to the 15-inch spacing, we stagger them. So you have a long row and you have a short row. You have a long row and you have a short row. So the corn row would be short. The bean or the canola row would be the long one. That staggering allows the trash flow to go a little. You're not just throwing trash on your neighbor, and your neighbor is throwing trash back at you. So it allows that trash flow. There's a lot of no-till. Momentum is a success in Brazil. It is just 2,000 planters. I constantly get asked by my leadership, when are we going to sell as many as we sell in Brazil? So I just got to ask them to take it easy. But Brazil is a no-till world, and there's a ton of residue, corn over corn, wheat stubble, bean stubble. So we know that these trash sweepers, the residue manager, are effective, and the floating tuber as well. It really helps when we're talking about finding that the proper space, even as we're talking about seed depth variation as we're floating and copying the topography. One thing that it's a curiosity that I have on corn, compaction is huge. We have the tall-looking corn, and then we have a dip, we have a pinch row impact. How relevant, how significant is soil compaction on the canola root system or on the canola crop?
Yeah, it's substantial. The canola, when you seed it, it's a wimp. When it's a volunteer, it's quite strong. But anything that hinders it coming out of the ground is just going to make it weaker. And as you look at flea beetles, they're going to hit those weaker plants. So all those things do matter. I would say it depends a lot on geography. So, growers down, South Regina and the Regina Plains, heavy clay soils, and compaction is a huge concern. And as you go to more loam soils or sandy loam soils, the compaction isn't as much concern. So definitely more regional in terms of that. But again, anything we can do to reduce stress on that early plant is going to make a big difference.
Was not even thinking about soil compaction. This is definitely something the planter will help, right? Tire inflation, those big VF tires. That is definitely playing a part. We don't have the pinch rows, right, because of the spacing, but something for us to consider maybe in a future trial as we talk about compaction.
Awesome. So Arthur, we've talked a little bit about the Momentum Planter and the history behind it. We obviously learned from history, but it helps us make a plan to move forward. What can we expect from Momentum now that we've got this introduction into the Western Canadian market for potentially future model years to help combat some of these questions that producers in Western Canada have?
The first thing that is guaranteed is more trials, right? When a farmer sees a seed saving and a yield advantage in somewhere in Indiana in the States, that's not my soil, that's not my soil type, right? It's not my tillage practice. So when we brought this idea of the trial in oats in Alberta, so it's not this province, but it's right here, right there, it was to bring that proximity, right? We're talking seed savings, depending on your seeding rate, your population, but the seed saving between a drill and a planter, it is no question, it's going to be there. It's just finding that sweet spot with the size of your seed and etc. The yield advantage, right? It was not a tremendous, oh my God, I got to buy new bins because there's so much crop that I have, but it's a 2 bushel an acre yield win that was found in the Oats College trial. So bringing those trials closer to this farmers, right? Having a trial around Regina, having a trial around Saskatoon. We were already talking, and I was asking Jim, hey, any chance you can spare some acres for us to do a trial? So for sure, we are going to be doing more and more trials. We want to have a discussion about fertility strategy. What can we bring as solutions, just any kind of solutions, especially since we don't have this huge tank. So what you can expect, absolutely trials in this region, trials focusing on drill versus planter, trials focusing on a fertility strategy, and something Jim said, and we kind of skipped, was increasing the utilization of that planter, right? We can plant an amazing corn, the best you've ever seen. We can plant a very good canola. What else can we do? So the first thing that I heard when I got here is post crops. So I'm kind of back to you, Jim. Do you have, what kind of post crops do you have? What's the percentage of your farm? And how relevant would it be to not only plant canola, but also get more acres with post?
Well, that was going to be my next question, is like, how can we expand where we use it? We currently are seeding our chickpeas and our peas on 15-inch spacing and see benefit with the air movement and the disease management. So using your planter, using the same fertility, some liquid or even some dry like you can do, how efficient can we be if we're planting 180 pounds per acre in peas, let's say?
Is there a specific fertility difference in the way your fertility strategy for pulse and canola, Dave?
On the pulses, we'd focus on our potassium, potash, and salt, and phosphorus and sulfur. There's no nitrogen requirement, so that side would be off. So that, in terms of tanks, that'd be a saving. I think the challenge in the peas, to Jim's comment, we're seeding canola at 2.1 pounds an acre. you're seeding peas at 180 pounds, right? So how do we get the acres per fill on the planter? We look at lentils, we're down to 50, 60 pounds. Maybe lentils would have a fit. And then the question is, are we comfortable with a 15-inch spacing on a lentil?
And that is an answer that I don't have, right? So
we'll try it on Jim's farm, and you can tell us next year.
That's the key there. We are actually talking with farmers, looking for farmers that are willing to partner. The best thing we could do is a strip trial, like the old college design, overlapping passes, right? And literally learn in your backyard about the advantages.
I think a bit of the challenge would be, if we knew the weather conditions for this year, I can tell you if 15-inch spacing is good or not. That's where canola, because it's such an elastic plant, it'll compensate and fill rows and do what it needs to do. A pulse crop isn't as elastic in terms of filling in those spaces, and so dry versus wet will make a big difference on the effectiveness of a 15-inch spacing. Is that fair, Jim, from your experience?
That's fair, but it twigged another question. I'm a seed grower. I have to clean out my machines all the time. How much work does it take?
Or does Jackson?
Well, I like Jackson to do it. But we have to clean out all the time. How hard is it to clean out a planter if you're switching varieties, if you're switching?
So this is everybody will have a clean out from the CFS, right? The Central Field Station or CCS, Central Commodity. So there's a very easy kind of, you just open a gate at the bottom of the CFS and you can kind of change hybrids from the CFS. The cool thing that we offer is the hopper clean out. Right? As you get the Momentum Planter, there is a suction gun that comes inside the toolbox, and there's a hose reel at the back of the planter, so you can literally just connect that suction gun to the hose reel and the pressurized air, and you can use it to clean from the hoppers. Having to disconnect all the hoppers and turn it upside down, you do it 48 times, even if it's Jackson doing, it's a pain. So that clean out from the hopper side, because you will never totally empty the hopper. As well as you plan, you're not going to totally empty. So the CFS clean out is very easy, and the hopper clean out, you use that suction gun, and it just makes it very, very, it's easy.
So very easy. Give me how much time would it take you to clean out? If you got practice and you're getting good at it, there's difference.
It's a matter of minutes, really. It's really. I think the worst thing is not how fast you can clean with the suction gun, is making sure that when you're blowing the seed in your bucket, that it's that you have some seed, so it doesn't hit the bottom of the bucket and jumps back at you. So from a time, it's a matter of minutes. You really just open the hoppers, and then you just put that suction gun in whatever seed bag or a bucket that you have. It is pretty neat. We talked about agronomic advantages. We talk about yield, financial advantages, but there are some things, and we try to avoid talking about features, so this doesn't look like a sales pitch. But there is one thing called the one button fold and unfold. I would talk with farmers, and farmers would say, Arthur, I have a 6 steps unfolding sequence to get my planter unfolded and the row units lowered. And I gotta do it always in the same sequence. If I mess it up or if I lose my post-it, I am done. So the Momentum Planter is one button. You press a button, unfolds the planter, lowers the floating toolbar, lowers the row unit. Something happens, you release the button, it stops, you keep pushing. So there are some cool things that will go beyond just profitability and that will kind of hit home with the planter guy or the planter girl, whoever is running.
Okay, my last question on that then. Since you're not going to be in Regina when we start to use it, are we getting really good staff trained over at Myles' shop, so that, because this is all when things go good, but when we're in the middle of seeding, something doesn't go good, and I set into panic mode first. If we have a plan to get through it, I'm okay with that. But if we're all looking at each other going, what do I do now? And we wait for Arthur to come back from Oakville, then I'm in trouble.
So Nix, and I'll pass it to, so Nix has the Momentum, the Fendt Momentum and the Fendt contract, but Nix also a precision planting premier training. So it's not only the Fendt entire network and parts supply, but also you have the entire PTx precision planting support when it comes to the service side, when it comes to training. The PTx precision planting side of the business is they heavily on agronomy training, problem solving, and less of the iron, which is the past, right, is the history of the OEMs, right, the dealers that we have. So I'll pass the ball to Myles, but the training goes beyond just momentum training because the core of momentum is the VSET meter, the VSET drive, and all of that is precision planting technology. And I bet that regardless of the color of the toolbar that you have here, we have farmers with precision planting in their rigs, whether it's an air drill with their Clarity or other. So it's more than just my training, right, the momentum training, but there's also the entire precision planting training that Nick's service goes through. But I'll pass the ball.
Just to jump off of what Arthur said, the process of our dealership, Nick's service, acquiring Momentum goes back about a year. And in that year, we've learned a lot. We've sent a couple of our dealership employees and ownership to Arizona for a dealer meeting. Since AGCO's acquisition of PTx Trimble, there's been dealership requirements as well for levels of training and parts stocking and parts ordering. I've been very fortunate, along with my colleagues Steve and Nathan, from a precision dealership level to get a lot of training and a lot of instruction. So we're very excited and have had a little bit of time here leading into Momentum to be prepared for this growing season and taking an appropriate bite out of what Momentum can be for our demos and getting this in the hands of farmers. So we're excited to get it out in the field. And I know, Arthur, you can't just call them and have them come in from Oakville, but we're quite confident that we've got a good group to run after this. Don't want to say babysit, but assist in how this planter gets out and make sure that we have the appropriate staff on site working with the grower, making sure that this thing's putting the seed in the ground the way that it's supposed to, the way that it's advertised. That clean, create, and close 3 C's concept is going to have a number of individuals from our dealership watching and making sure that it's doing that adequately.
One thing that should speak to that is we unfortunately had to say no to Nick's 1 year ago. We wanted, Lee and I talked, and there was an opportunity to bring a marketing demo planter here, and it was too close to the season. We haven't had the chance to do the Arizona training, which was a training that we go there in February. We can't train planters anywhere. You go to the south, we have a farm next to a hotel that we can irrigate, and the soil gets real planting soil, and we can train and train and train on that. So we had not done the training. The marking unit was going to get here late because it had to hit Illinois, South Dakota, and Baltic, then somewhere in Minnesota, and then Alberta. So we chose to give up 1 year of starting this business because it was not the right thing to do from a training, from a customer experience. Someone was a farmer because you said, hey, I have a farmer waiting to do this. So there's a farmer that knows exactly about the story because we were trying to do this 1 year ago and we just said, no, we're not ready. It's not the moment. And now we have a 48 row. It's going to be pulled by 1042 and it's demo season. So it's a trial and demo season. So we'll be ready.
Yeah. Getting a dealership set up with something as innovative and new as a planter in Western Canada obviously requires a lot of buy-in from the dealership and from its employees, and I'm confident to say that we've got a great team ready to do that. But what we've learned at a lot of our momentum training, what we've heard is that it's about the right fit at the right time for a dealership. And not only is it about the right fit at the right time for a dealership, it's the right fit and the right time for farmers' operation as well.
The clock is ticking on us, and I think that by the time the clock ticks, they are going to get us off the stage, right? Even so, I think we could open up for a Q&A. Just if there's anyone that would like to ask any question to what we presented before we run out of time, and the light went from green to yellow, so they will call security on us.
Forgiveness versus permission. Keep going.
So any question, anyone wants to have a question to anything that was presented or just something that we didn't cover before we close? Can we bulk fill with an air cart? So refilling the seed to the planter. Oh, fertilizer. Okay. So this is the idea, one of the ideas I'm pursuing, right? And that's the concept of the in-between cart. If we have a cart behind the tractor in front of the planter, and that cart is carrying this 800, 900 bushel, we could use that cart to blow the fertilizer and keep the tank going, right? So we can increase our capacity, not with the planter tank, but using a cart. That's what you meant, right? Okay. Any more questions before they come and take another mic?
Well, we appreciate you all taking time out of your day to join us for this. We hope that you learned a lot. It's a big discussion. We look forward to continuing with as many of you as we can. If you have any questions, we'll be back at our booth in Hall 11 there. And once again, thank you very much for joining us.
Before we go, I want to say thanks to Jim and Dave, right? Not just being here and bringing that knowledge from the farm, just allowing me to go there, ask a million questions before we go here, and help us build our trials and the next step. So thank you both.
Perfect. Thank you very much.